Hello and welcome back to another instructional video on creating packet tracer labs. This week I will demonstrate lab 2.3.3.3, building a simple network. Again, this is a valuable lab to do to gain simulated experience of working with real equipment. Notice here we need two switches. As listed under the required resources section, we need two 2960 switches. Don't worry that the iOS may not match the iOS and packet tracer. That's covered in Networking 3. Most of what we will do is the same in both iOS versions. We also need two PCs and two types of cables, console cable and Ethernet cables. Since we are working in packet tracer, we can connect using a console cable to simulate the real world, but it's not really necessary since we have a privilege of using the CLI tab on the device. Let me show you. Let's launch packet tracer. Click the switches icon, the second, in the lower left-hand corner. In the middle, you will now see all the switches that packet tracer supports. Of course, there are many more, but we will only use the 2960. Click and drag a 2960 to the topology window. Click the switch and select the CLI tab. Here we have a simulated connection via a console cable. Of course, that isn't possible in the real world. You would need to actually connect a PC and a console cable to connect and manage the switch. Now let's add the other devices. We need another switch. Next, click End Devices and drag two PCs to the window. Part 1 wants you to power on all devices, but by default, packet tracer turns them on for us. Next, step 2 wants us to cable them up. So click the Connections button. You will select a straight through cable. But first press and hold the Control key and then click the solid straight through cable line. Click the first switch, select Fast Ethernet 01, then click the second switch and select the same, Fast Ethernet 01. This is depicted in our topology up at the top of the lab. Next, click a PC and select Fast Ethernet 0. Then click the switch and select Fast Ethernet 06, again as shown in the topology diagram. Notice the cable light goes green on the PC but is amber on the switch for 30 seconds. This is by design and is discussed in later courses. Click the second PC and repeat the same process as for the first PC, but this time select Fast Ethernet 018 on the second switch. Press the Escape key on your keyboard to turn off the connections. Next, we will configure the PCs with IP addresses. Here is where our packet tracer differs from the lab. Skip steps 1A through E, although I would recommend you check these steps out on your home PC so you can be familiar with them. Just don't actually change anything. We will pick up in step 1F. So click the first PC, then click the Desktop tab, then click IP Configuration. Enter the IP address in the graphic, 192.168.1.10. Then press the Tab key. Notice a subnet mask automatically populates. There is no need to make any other changes here, so we can click the X to save and close this configuration. Note that you aren't actually prompted to save, but if you go back into the IP configuration, your changes are there. Repeat for the second PC and enter 192.168.1.11 for its IP address. press Tab, then click the X to close the IP window. Click PC 0 again, and then click the command prompt to verify the settings, as in step 2. Type ipconfig/all to confirm the IP configuration. Notice the IP address and subnet mask are correct. We don't have a router in our topology, so we don't need a default gateway. If we type ping 192.168.1.11 and press enter, your pings should show a reply as depicted in graphic C. If not, make sure you didn't skip any steps, except the ones I mentioned above. Part 3 will have us configure each switch. You can skip step 1 and instead click the first switch to get to the CLI. If you were to do this in the real world, here we would use a console connection from the PC to the switch. Then, using a program like PuTTY, we would see the terminal window similar to what we see here in the CLI window. Notice I pressed enter to get to our user exec prompt. For step 2, we will get into privilege exec mode. But first I want to demo something. I'm going to type EM. This is a typo. But notice it's attempting to translate this command, looking for a DNS server to reply. It waits exactly 1 minute for a reply, and if none is found, it says unknown command or computer name, or unable to find this address. I'm going to use this nifty little fast forward button to show you the reply. So remember this in just a second, and we'll fix that. So now type EN for enable to get into privilege exec mode. That's a shortcut. Next, type config T or conf T, either one will work to get us into configure terminal, where we will make our changes. Our next command is to give it the switch a name. We're going to use the hostname command. So hostname S1 to name this first switch. Notice my prompt went from switch to S1. Remember that DNS lookup that took a minute? Our next command will get rid of that. We're going to type no IP domain dash lookup to prevent these lookups if we make a mistake. Next, we need to configure local passwords. The first password they have you configure is the secret password using the command enable secret class. But the confusing thing to note here is that this password will be the second one that we are prompted for. Just take note of this for now. So enter enable secret class and press enter. Next, enter the console password, which is the first one you're prompted for when you access the device. It requires the next 3 commands. The first command is line console 0, or line con 0 for short. The next command is password Cisco. And then the last command is login. This is the step that is most often missed. The last command, exit, is not necessarily required. It just depends on what you need to do next. We're going to enter it for now to keep it simple. Next, we need to create a banner. So type banner MOTD which stands for message of the day. Then use a character that will not be used in the message. The pound symbol is a popular symbol. The reason it can't be used in the message is because it delineates both the beginning and end of the message. So if we use it in the message, it will truncate what we want to display. So we're going to enter unauthorized access is strictly prohibited and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Notice we end our message of the day banner with the same character we started with. That's our delineator. And then press enter. Next, we type exit to take us back to our privilege exec mode. Another way we can get back to privilege exec is to type end. Last step, we need to save our configuration to NVRAM using the copy running config startup config command. Or we can type copy run start for short. The destination file name here, we're just confirming that it is in fact startup-config. If you wanted to change it to something else, you could, but then it would not be used during the reload process. This is important because of a power outage. In case a power outage occurs, when the switch powers back on, all of your settings will be there. If you type show run, you can see all of our configuration changes have been made. Host name, enable secret, no IP domain lookup. There are other things that are configured by default, but we don't need to change those. Here's our banner message of the day, as well as our line console password. And we did not configure a line VTY password, but I want to point out that login is there by default for line VTY. However, it is not there by default for line console. And I'll just show you that in a second on the second switch. If we type show start and press enter, notice we have the exact same output as our show running config. And that's because of that copy run to start. If I click on our second switch, you will probably notice after we get into enable mode and show run that our default settings that are there include the line console command, but again, no login. I just wanted to demonstrate one more thing about the passwords. Remember I said we enter our password enable secret first, and then we entered the line console second. But notice now that the switch has timed out, we have to press return to get started. Notice our banner message of the day, and the first thing it's prompting us for is our console password. If we scroll back up, we can see that our console password is Cisco. So if I type in Cisco and press enter, we now have access to the console. If I type in enable or EN, the second password I'm prompted for is the first one we created, or class. So that's that confusing note I wanted to highlight. You do need to know the difference between the privileged exec enable secret password versus the line console access password, which is the first one we are prompted for. So that concludes the video demonstration. The rest of the lab just has you do some show version commands as well as show IP interface brief. Hopefully you found this packet tracer lab useful. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Have a great day.